AskReddit. Doctors of Reddit, what, if any, is your best story of patients on hallucinogenics? I had a patient who had taken an ungodly amount of Benadryl in a failed suicide attempt. A lot of people think that since it makes you drowsy, a bunch of it might be able to kill them in their sleep. Instead of killing them though, Benadryl basically gives you absolutely terrifying hallucinations for like 24 hours or more and then leaves you with the worst multi-day hangover you have ever had in your life. He would not stop yelling and screaming about that damn cat poking its head out of the ceiling tiles every single time I left the room. He also had short bursts of thinking he was covered in bugs and I would find him stripped naked and yelling into the wall. I had a guy who was freaking out thinking he was going to die because he thought he had eaten too many hallucinogenic mushrooms. He went online and saw that sometimes patients are given activated charcoal to soak up the mushrooms in the stomach. Not entirely true BTW. So he goes outside and starts chowing down on charcoal briquettes that he has in his garage for grilling. After about a dozen he realizes, holy shit, I'm eating charcoal briquettes. Now he is really freaking out, so he grabs his dog, Asda thinks he is never coming back to his house, and drives himself to the ed. He parks out front, walks into triage with a pup, black charcoal all over his face and hands, and says, I need a doctor and someone to watch my dog when I die. Okay, so not a doctor and not exactly a great story, but stay far away from K2/spice/ any other kind of synthetic cannabinoids. I work in the mental health field and nearly all of the staff here agree that they have never seen worse episodes of psychosis than some of the ones they've seen after people take K2, and these are people who've seen it all. Opioids, cocaine, crack, PCP, you name it. Stuff like violently throwing their entire body into a wall over and over and over. One person woke up in a psych hospital and couldn't remember anything that happened after smoking K2. They told her she'd stripped naked and was pouring milk on herself in the middle of a very busy street, and she was absolutely horrified, mostly because she couldn't remember any of it. People legit trying to eat themselves. Seizures and cardiac arrest. The kind of stuff that I would call absurd and unrealistic if it was in a movie. There are hundreds and hundreds of different chemical compounds they can use to make that stuff, and they are constantly changing it to avoid it being detectable in drug tests or to skirt laws. Because it's not regulated, you literally have no way of knowing what you're actually smoking when you get that shit, but you can almost be guaranteed that whatever it is will fuck up your brain, and not in a good way. Not in staff, but registration in the ed, so I see and talk to way more people than staff, and honestly a lot of people tell me stuff they wouldn't tell staff. Dumb, I know, but it leads to gems like this guy. I had one guy sitting on his bed just staring at his hands, touching his index and thumbs together over and over. When I walked in to get his info, he just stared into my eyes without blinking and said, dude, why do I have lobster hands? I assured him that he did not, but he wasn't mad, just confused. I soon realized he should not sign consent forms in this condition and told him I would come back later. As I was about to walk out, he grabbed my arm. Being a 6 feet 2 inches 250 pounds guy, I wasn't scared of physical harm, so I let his hand stay. But he had this look of terror, excitement, and said, just make sure not to step on any of the Smurfs running around. They are everywhere. I thanked him and left. When I came back later, he was fine and seemed to have no recollection of anything. I'm a paramedic, but this story is from back when I was an EMT, hand holder, oxygen giver, bandage distributor. Got called at night for a teenage male who had ingested mushrooms. On the way to the call, my paramedic partner was unusually silent. After a while she pipes up, I don't get it. He ate mushrooms. Like, what? Portebeas. She grew up very sheltered in the country. So that's how this was gonna go. We get there and the cops walk out, a skinny kid wearing only boxers. Took some shrooms, first time ever, freaked out and told his parents, who called 911. My partner is spinning in circles and asking whether she should call poison control. I help the kid into the ambulance and onto the stretcher, turn the lights down low and tell my partner just to drive to the hospital. The kid is calming down a bit but he's tripping pretty hard, asking if his parents are Jesus and stuff like that. This was before smartphones, when iPods were the shit. I had one of those radio transmitters you could plug into the iPod and then play music through the vehicle speakers. It had a remote that I carried on my belt along with the clicker for the ambulance. We were going to the hospital, lights down low, just being chill, when I remembered what my partner and I had been listening to a couple hours before when we checked our equipment. Thievery Corporation. So I reached down and hit the remote without him noticing. A few seconds go by and he turns to me with the widest eyes I've ever seen. Whoa? What is this? Music? He was in true bliss. He kept asking me about the music for the rest of the ride. We dropped him off and I wrote "Listen to Thievery Corporation" on a sheet of paper and tucked it into the waistband of his boxers. I like to think there's some dude out there from upstate New York who fell in love with thievery in high school but doesn't really know why. I was a doctor that was on rotation in the emergency department. 33-year-old male who was brought in naked by the police, under the influence of suspected mushroom ingestion. He had a bit of trouble understanding why he'd been arrested, despite being very aware of the fact that he'd been caught gallivanting around naked in the rain in a children's playground. The initial police response had been with 2 officers, and he told me with glee that they weren't able to grab him because he was slippery like an oiled pig in the rain, and the nakedness didn't help with no clothing for them to grab. Due to being unable to catch him, they called for dog squad backup. He recounted with a shit-eating grin how he'd hidden inside a giant puddle like Rambo and had thrown sticks and rocks to confuse the police dog. Following an hour or so, they gave up and reverted to using a search line of 12 police slowly advancing to find him. Eventually one stumbled into this goblin's little swamp puddle, and then they took another 15 minutes trying to catch him as he bolted naked around the children's playground. Again. His only regret, despite his wife refusing to come and pick him up from the hospital, was that he hadn't eaten more shrooms. Edit, I'm glad this story is brightening a few days. Thank you for the silvers and golds. To his fans, I'm sure he's somewhere out there to this very day. Naked, slippery, and plotting his revenge. Yeah, physician here. I see complications of drug abuse daily. That said, ER visits from hallucinogens are very rare, not counting some bad reactions to PCP and ketamine, which are more dissociative agents than hallucinogens. I have probably only seen a handful of cases in my entire career. I wish I could say the same for alcohol, which contributes to multiple injuries every shift I work. Most of the time it is pretty boring. Usually the patient was either naive to the drug or took a bit too much and has some anxiety. A few cases of teenagers being caught tripping by their parents and dragged to the hospital, which seems like a terrible experience. Now, what I am seeing is an increase in senior citizens having bad reactions to marijuana edibles. Basically, someone in their retirement community gets a medical marijuana card, and they all decide to try edibles for the first time, only to find out this isn't the weed they were smoking in the 60s. Not really a hallucinogen, but one time I was using propofol to sedate a patient for a procedure. He thought he was Lionel from Thundercats, and was doing the Thundercats thing the whole time. It was hysterical. Outside of work, one of my friends ate a bag of shrooms at a party, and got stuck in a loop talking about the Camel from the cigarette brand. He was convinced the Camel was coming to the party. Another friend tried to go surfing one night while on shrooms. Issue was he forgot to put clothes on. Yep, guy was walking down the road at 2 a.m. butt naked, with nothing but a surfboard. So while I cannot give my endorsement for drugs, hallucinogens, assuming untainted product, in reasonable doses, in a safe setting, tend to be fairly safe compared to other drugs of abuse that I see regularly. Now I am sure people have done dumb, dangerous shit while on them, but it seems low compared to other substances, some of which are legal. Edit, I apologize everyone. I get it. His name is Lion-O. I guess I am a little out of date on my Thundercats trivia. Had a friend become impatient with mushrooms once. He took an eighth, and an hour later decided they weren't very strong, so the most logical thing to do would be eat his other eighth. Cut to 2 hours later, and he is parked on top of a parking garage. Tried to drive across town when they kicked in and he immediately realized his fuck up. He tried to wait it out, but after being abandoned by everyone else, I wasn't around. No way in hell would I have left the poor guy on 7 grams of shrooms to his own devices, and he decides he needs help. So he calls 911. While on the phone he wants to be as honest as possible, so he tells them about his .22 caliber rifle behind the seat of his truck. Only it comes out as, there's a gun in the car. He says he was tripping and sweating so badly. It was July. The next thing he remembers is hearing a tink 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 and looking up to being surrounded by police, guns drawn and ready for anything. Friend isn't a danger though, so they get him in an ambulance, and give him charcoal to induce vomiting. The rest of the night is a blur for him, and he wakes up cuffed to the bed. They ask him if there's anyone he can call for a ride, and he tells them his mom is a nurse who works on the 2nd floor. Apparently while tripping he kept telling them to go upstairs and get mom, so they all have a chuckle realizing his mom really was upstairs. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. If you were at all entertained, please consider giving this video a like and subscribing for future content. Stay safe everyone, until next time.